Good afternoon. The time now is 12:30 on your Thursday. I'm Julie Broughton. This is Take 6. We're so happy you're spending a little bit of time with us today for your afternoon news brief. Of course, we always get a check of your forecast on Take 6. If you've been outside today, you know it feels absolutely fabulous and we're seeing so much sunshine. So we'll talk more about your forecast for you in just a moment. I will tell you it includes some 80-degree readings in that 7-day outlook. But first, we are staying on top of that tragic story developing out of Washington, D.C., where shortly before 9 o'clock last night, a passenger jet carrying 64 people collided with a military helicopter over the Potomac River. This happened near Reagan Washington National Airport. We are hearing from officials today who are saying that they think no one survived this, so now it has turned into a recovery effort there in Washington, D.C., and you are looking at video just of that horrific scene right now as rescue crews work to recover what is left of this scene. And joining us now for a little bit more, certainly as far as historic perspective on that, is News 6 investigative reporter and producer Donovan Myrie. And Donovan, I know that you are someone who is somewhat of an aviation history enthusiast and you possess a great deal of knowledge. And this is something that we haven't seen something like this, fortunately, in a long time, if ever.
Yeah, Julie, it's been a minute, as they say, since we've had a major fatal aviation crash here in the United States. The last one I remember was Asiana Airlines. That was a flight that was coming into San Francisco. The pilots landed short on the runway. The aircraft broke up. Three people ended up dying in that crash. Two of them were actually killed from the force of the collision, and a third one was actually thrown from the aircraft. And unfortunately, she was run over by a fire truck that was spraying foam on the plane after the crash. So that's the last one that we had, and that was over a decade ago. So I was saying in the morning meeting today that it's been almost kind of half of a generation since somebody has experienced or we've talked about major plane crashes here in the United States. And this crash is really, really kind of, I won't say bizarre, but we've seen some of this before. This aircraft was American Airlines Flight 5342. It was a regional jet, a CRJ 700 made by Bombardier. Very, very safe plane, flies all over the United States, actually all over the world. This happened to be en route from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. And the way that the aircraft was approaching was basically coming up the Potomac. And if I remember correctly, there are two runways going into Reagan, kind of that route. Larger planes go one way, and at the last second, air traffic control might take a smaller plane to a shorter runway. I used to live across the river from that airport, and when I first moved there, sometimes I'd look out of my balcony and I'd actually see planes missing their approaches, and they'd have to go back up and go around again. And in fact, that's happened to me twice. And the first time it happened to me was at Reagan. But this midair collision with the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter, they say that there are no survivors. So they're presuming about 69 people who have died in this. This crash has ties to other crashes, Julie. If you are of a certain age, you remember back on January 13th, 1982, an Air Florida plane crashed into the 14th Street Bridge in Washington, D.C. That plane had a problem with icing. The pilots made a number of errors before they took off. The plane was only airborne for about 30 seconds before it started to lose altitude, crashed into the river. Absolutely dramatic video when that crash occurred of a U.S. Park Services helicopter swooping in, pulling one person out of the water, dragging a rope and pulling other people to shore. And only five people ended up surviving the crash, and one of those five actually ended up drowning because he was helping other people get to shore. So we've seen that crash before, and that's one of the things that we thought about last night when this plane crash unfolded, looking at that. Another crash that is somewhat connected but not connected, September 25th, 1978. And I'm going to say this, and you have to kind of follow me. It was a PSA plane, a 727. They collided over San Diego with a Cessna 172. 144 people were killed. At the time, it was the worst crash that we had in the United States. What's interesting is, listen to what I said. PSA. This crash last night involved a PSA Airlines crash. Two different airlines, okay? Two different airlines, but spelled basically the same. PSA Airlines versus PSA. PSA was an older airline. They were a discount airline. They're out of business. This airline involved last night flying for American Airlines. PSA Airlines was actually named in tribute to that first airline. So you'll hear PSA a couple of times. Just know that they're two different airlines. But we found it kind of interesting that that was a midair collision that occurred with these airlines of similar names. And then finally, we know that a number of members of the U.S. figure skating team and the Russian figure skating team were killed in this crash. Well, back in 1961, a Sabina Airlines, and Sabina is no longer in business, a 707 of theirs crashed in Belgium en route to Prague. What was interesting about that crash was the entire U.S. skating team and their coaches were killed in that crash, 18 of them. And if you've heard the name Peggy Fleming, she ended up becoming a household name in the 60s and 70s when it came to skating because she was an alternate. She was not good enough to be with the team when they traveled. And after the team died, she ended up representing the United States. And as they say, the rest is kind of history.
Oh, wow. I did not know that about Peggy Fleming. I do remember that name and recognize that name. And Donovan, the next step in this, of course, is they're trying to piece together what exactly happened. And some officials we heard from earlier said that it appeared that both of these aircraft were on regular flight paths, that it didn't seem anything out of the ordinary at this point. And I know when you think about at MCO, it's not often that you see any sort of helicopter traffic here in our area, but that's pretty common in DC.
Yeah, if you've ever been to DC, you'll see helicopters flying up and down the Potomac all the time, heading towards various places. If you're heading towards the White House, you'll see Marine One and two other helicopters usually flying in formation up and down the Potomac. That's the way you get to the CIA going down the Potomac, and as well as a bunch of other buildings. What's interesting again is you'll kind of hook around and come into Reagan National Airport. The problem there is you've got a military helicopter there on one set of radios, and I believe for the military helicopters, they're on like a VHF channel. Civilian commercial aircraft on UHF, they should be able to hear each other, but from one report that I heard this morning, there might have been a communication problem between the two. But then it's really up to ATC to make sure that each of those planes see each other. I'm sorry, each of those aircraft see each other and acknowledge each other. When you don't get a lot of plane collisions. We've had instances where planes have literally headed towards each other and have basically not run into each other. There's a system called TCAS, and basically this is how planes talk to each other. And if TCAS senses on each aircraft that another aircraft is approaching, it'll tell one aircraft go left. It'll tell the other aircraft to also go left, so they kind of like go around each other. We've had instances where TCAS has basically prevented major collisions and things. When you start mixing military helicopters with commercial airlines, I don't know how that system works. I can assume that basically that military helicopter, it's probably what they call visual flight rules. It's like look around and see what's going on. If you've ever flown in a helicopter, one of the first things the pilots will tell you is if you see something, say something. And I remember the first time I flew in a helicopter, I go, don't you have radar or something? He goes, up here, we look around to make sure we know what's going on and we listen to air traffic controllers. So yeah, that's the next step to kind of figure out why they didn't see each other, or if they did, did somebody assume somebody else was going to do something different?
And I know you are working on some stories for later today coming up on News 6, and you're going to be talking to an FAA investigator. What can we expect to see there?
Hopefully, when I talk to him, this is a former FAA investigator who is now in kind of a private practice, and he can explain a little bit more about what goes on in an FAA investigation. The NTSB in cases like this always takes the lead, but you have the NTSB, you have the FAA, and you have the military which is something you normally don't get. Three very big agencies all looking at the same crash. But again, the NTSB takes the lead. And again, it's been a long time since we've looked at something like this. Remember, the NTSB investigates crashes, okay? It's really up to the FAA to then basically take the next step after that crash investigation has been completed to say, here's what we're going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again. The NTSB, all they do is investigate. They cannot make any new rules or adjustments or anything to the way that pilots fly or commercial aircraft do the things that they do. It's really then up to the FAA. And even though both are under the Department of Transportation, the FAA really has no jurisdiction over the NTSB. They're an independent agency, and they want to keep it that way so that there's kind of no conflict of interest.
All right. Well, Donovan Myrie, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today, and we will see you later today on News 6.
Thank you, Julie.
Let's get a check of your forecast as well. It is a beautiful Thursday for us. We started the day, though, with some fog, and again tonight I think we'll see some areas of fog. Here's how it looks for you on the satellite and radar imagery, though, as we roll you through your afternoon hours. We're seeing very little cloud cover, so enjoying a nice amount of sunshine out there today, and that will be the case as we head through the rest of our day today. So expect just a few clouds overall, though a lot of sunshine filtering through. Here's how we started our day, even a few degrees warmer than normal in some spots. 52 was your low in Orlando. The Villages, you started at 46, 43 in Palm Coast, and 50 in Melbourne. Right now, we are already warmer than the normal high, which is 73 in Orlando. So we are at 75. Ocala, you're at 71. It is 70 in Palm Coast and 72 right now in Cape Canaveral. Our winds are coming in out of the east as we move through the latter part of the day and into tomorrow, though. Our winds will shift from the south, and that will help to kick our temperatures way up as we head through the day tomorrow into the 80s. For today, though, we'll stay on track with highs in the mid to upper 70s, so a few degrees warmer than we are right now, going to 77 in Kissimmee, and you'll top out at 78 in Leesburg. Overnight tonight, we'll fall back into the upper 50s and low 60s. Again, that southerly component to our winds will keep us mild. Low 60s along the coast in Brevard County, 55 in Palm Coast, and 57 for your low in the Villages. Here's how it looks for the next 7 days. Now tomorrow we go to a high of 81 degrees. Clouds will increase late in the day tomorrow ahead of a front. That front moves in early on Saturday, bringing with it a 20% chance of showers. Some cloud cover and a wind shift behind that will keep our temperatures at 75 for Saturday before we go back near 80 for Sunday and Monday. And Tuesday and Wednesday, we will be in the 80s. We will break down your full forecast and that chance of rain for Saturday morning coming up for you starting on News 6 at 4. We will also have the very latest for you on air and online throughout the day of that developing situation in D.C. with that mid-air plane collision. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today on Take 6, and I will see you on News 6 starting at 4.